PM, can you show us what you have there and what's the story behind this?
Yeah, so this right here is my favorite camera of all time. It's the Bolex 16mm camera. And when I first was introduced to this camera, I was in San Francisco at the film school where I was helping students understand how to do some 16mm film editing.
That's beautiful.
And it's steel and leather from 1962.
Wow.
It takes 100-foot rolls of 16mm film. So you're actually loading this film, and I'm really excited about this because it's really a box of magic tricks. Like, there's a lot of film cameras out there, but not a lot that has the capability of doing, you can rewind the film and double expose it, quadruple expose it. You can do single frames. You can actually do lock it down and have it do a continuous shot. It can do 12 frames up to 64 frames a second with this little twist here, going to 64 frames or all the way down to 12. And you keep it on 18 because 18, the number is actually in red, and that's what you load the film with. And you actually wind it up. So it's a wind-up camera. That's there.
Where are you buying the film?
So the film, like there's the sound it makes.
Oh, that's pretty.
So that's at 18 frames a second. And there's a limitation there because you can actually hear the sound, right? So they say it's not a sync sound camera. Every time you reopen it, the counter goes back to 0. But a really beautiful side of this, here actually, we'll move this back a little bit here. A really beautiful side of this is the lenses. I love that there's this turret on the front of it that you can put 3 different lenses and have them going. So when I do a light reading, what I'll generally do is I'll set the f-stop on all 3 of my lenses at the same time. And we'll hook these up real quick here. But I have a 50mm, a 25, and a 10. And my 50mm lens, this very rare lens here, has the capability of doing macro. So you can do macro close-ups with it, which just gives me the ability to film a close-up of a penny or a human eye. A lot of lenses, they have to be around 2 or 3 feet away from an object to find focus, where this could be around 3 or 4 inches from it, around about, maybe a little bit less than that. Let's see. And then we'll put the 10mm on the bottom, because obviously if this was too close to the 25 or the 50, you'd actually have some of it in the frame.
Wow. Had you learned how to use it before you purchased it, or no?
Yeah, so I spent some time at this film school. It was like my back door in, working in this film lab for a little bit in the Academy of Art in San Francisco downtown. And I was able to film with a Bolex while I was up there for a little bit of time. Here's the actual, whichever lens is at that middle portion is what you're actually shooting with. This is a 25mm. So let's see here. So no, I had never, living in Ohio, I never shot film before. When I went to San Francisco, I had my introduction to this Bolex camera and just fell madly in love with it. Because when I thought about making films back in Ohio, I always thought it had to be something so much larger. And this is so handheld, and to have the ability to be able to change to any of these different lenses.
Oh, wow, it moves.
So it can be 50mm, or I've got a 25mm, or you have your 10. And because you're shooting on film, those millimeters actually double, because it's 16mm film. So a 10 would be the equivalent of 20mm, 25 would be the equivalent of a 50mm, 50 would be the equivalent of 100. And it creates a beautiful image. It's a 27-second exposure at 24 frames a second. And you can only load a 100-foot roll of film in this. And 100 feet translates to about 3 minutes of filming time. And I love that limitation. It's a big facet to my creative process now, is shooting on film and having that limitation built into it. Because of making films for the past, 18 years, there's been a side of this that I understand now. Krzysztof Kieslowski said something that was incredibly important to me, and that was, it's not so important where you place the camera, but why you place it where you place it. And that's a thought that I've thought quite a bit about over time, and wondering, what he means by that. And then suddenly, on a theoretical standpoint, you start to comprehend how you can get into different positions in the human mind based on where you place the camera. So shooting on film, you have to be really specific what you're going to shoot. You can't just shoot coverage of everything. And I really love that. I love the idea of walking into a space and saying, all right, we got 3 minutes of shooting time. Let's shoot these shots. And you know what? Looking through this little viewfinder, it's pretty difficult to find your focus. It takes a little bit of figuring it out within yourself. But once you have it dialed in, you'd be hard pressed to find something that looks more beautiful than 16mm being shot on a Bolex. There's something about that spring wound nature of pulling the film through the gate that gives it a whole different spin than anything that could happen. You shoot digital video and you can try to put film, what are they called? Film little overlays to be able to see film grain and stuff digitally on your footage. But to have film really being pulled through this gate on these reels, there's nothing digitally yet that can show what that looks like.
And where is the sound?
Yeah. So there's no sound.
Okay, no sound.
You would be recording sound separately.
Okay.
And then syncing later.
And what is compatible? Would modern things wouldn't be compatible? No modern like H6 or something.
Actually, no. You can record sound, if anything, digitally. Because a lot of times what I'll do is I'll shoot on film and then I'll have it digitized. And then I'll edit on my computer.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and then sometimes I'm doing some longhand editing, depending on what the project is. I would love to do a narrative film that I actually cut longhand so you can see the tape splicing, and then digitize it and add audio. So the thing with this is you could hear the sound of it a moment ago, so you can hear that within your shots. So if I was filming an interview of you, and then you would hear part of the camera. But I planned for that with Devoted in Time, the film I'm making, the new feature-length film that I'm shooting entirely on the Bolex. We plan to hear the camera at times. And then there'll be sequences where you don't hear the camera, where we completely recreate the sound design in post.
How many of these are left in the world?
There's still a company in Switzerland you could buy a brand new one for quite a bit. There's definitely a higher price point to purchasing a brand new one of these, but there are a number of them. I mean, if you really go out and search for a Bolex, you can end up finding one somewhere. So I don't know, there could be hundreds out there. It's really hard to put a number on, to be honest with you, but it's not easy to find one in great condition. That's a big facet of it. I was lucky enough to find an individual in New York who refurbishes Bolexes and lenses. So everything that I have is recrafted. And this glass, there's a gold tint to the glass that's not like digital lenses. That there's this it's old glass. There's nothing like it. You can't even use regular lens cleaner without damaging what's there already.
How do you clean it?
Luckily, I haven't had to clean it at this moment. But it's something I have to figure out, the best way to clean this old glass in the future.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there like a Facebook group or a community of these Bolex owners?
There's definitely a lot of, there's a producing partner of mine, Alyssa Bolzay, who made a film called Beyond the Bolex. Her great-grandfather was the inventor of the Bolex, and she's connected to a whole lot of different groups of individuals shooting on this camera. Now, it's more known in the narrative or in the experimental community. And then within the experimental community, this is a much more utilized tool. But Mark Jenkins just made the movie NS Men and Bait with this camera, a narrative feature-length film shot entirely on a clockwork wind-up camera. And now I'm venturing into making feature-length films on the same camera. And I do believe that the fact that you're shooting on film, you can really, there's no limitations to this. I mean, it's really a beautiful artistic tool. When you're talking about a beautiful paintbrush, because to me, a camera body is like a paintbrush. Each individual lens is like a different color, and then whatever layer that you would put on top of that, for instance, like a filter or something, is almost like you're mixing colors. So it's really like, to me, one of the best paintbrushes I can possibly utilize.
And what's the story behind purchasing this? You were living in San Francisco.
Yeah, I was living in San Francisco. My rent there, because I was sharing an apartment with somebody, and my rent there was about $970 a piece. And it was a little studio apartment. I had just moved there. I was on a bunk bed. I had gotten a job working in the film school, where to me it was like my back door in to actually being in that environment. And I started shooting with their Bolex. And then slowly over time, I realized that this was my favorite camera. I found one for sale, and I literally gave up a month's rent to purchase the body, and the 10mm lens is what came for $900. Now this body goes for over $3,000 because it's rare. It's harder to find certain models out there. But yeah, I had to work. At one point I was working at the film school, Starbucks, and dog walking. So I worked 7 days a week for a period of time. So making Devoted in Time is such an important movie for me on another aspect too, because I went broke buying this camera. So now getting to make at least one, feature film with it, it's like, oh, I keep thinking to myself, get on the other side of that. And it was so worth that, emotional disturbance of going through those difficult times. And now looking up how expensive this model is luckily it was only $900. I'm almost kicking myself for, you can get a 10 times viewfinder or a 13 times, and that just means how much light is going through. This is a 10 times viewfinder. If I would have spent another $100 or $200, I would have gotten the 13 times viewfinder. And so I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't go even more broke, but what are you gonna do?
Well, it makes you appreciate the fact that, when you do make the film, or other things that you've shot, just all the sort of pain and sacrifice that was worth it. Did people tell you were crazy, like don't do it, don't spend your money on it? Or did you not tell anybody, you just went ahead and bought it?
Oh, I just bought it. Yeah. I'm the kind of guy that if I get something in my head, I just do it. If you're asking people their advice, most people are coming from a safe background, but I usually don't. I mean, there's so many moments in my life where my money goes to below zero. And it's like getting comfortable in that zone. I think that's where an artist, probably thrives. So yeah, when I wanted to get this, it was like, screw it, I'm gonna get it.
So you bought it, and now have other people reached out to you with questions? Have you ever, helped anybody who's thinking of buying one?
I've had a couple of people recently ask me a couple of things about it, but I think as Devoted in Time comes out and we have even a larger conversation around the Bolex, I think there'll probably be a lot more questions. I know Alyssa, through introducing her film out into the world beyond the Bolex, that she got quite a few people. I mean, you got Wim Wenders, Steven Spielberg, a whole lot of people started their careers on this camera, making short films, learning how to shoot. So it's a beautiful tool. Again, there's not a lot of film cameras out there you can actually rewind the film and shoot again. There's a filmmaker named Jerome Heiler. He's an experimental filmmaker, and his work is ridiculously beautiful. If you have a chance to check it out, it's usually playing at a museum. What he'll do is he'll shoot a roll, and he'll rewind the whole roll, and he'll shoot it over and over for a month or two. And then he'll process the film, and you have these beautiful exposures with all kinds of images laying on top of each other, and then he creates these experimental pieces. So there's not a lot of film cameras that have that capability to be able to shoot all those different, they call this the Swiss Army knife of film cameras. It was the first camera created to be able to shoot in all the different poles on the planet. So you can take this to any kind of conditions, and generally the screen might, your 24 frames a second might vary a little bit depending on the climate, but it'll always work. There's even a story I heard about a gentleman dropping this camera in a river. He waded over to the side because all of his luggage, everything toppled over on this raft. And he waded over to the side of the river and marked it. And then he came back 3 months later when the river was lower, waded around and found it.
Oh, wow.
Dried it out, worked fine. And then his son, who was older when he was telling the story, this is actually in the Beyond the Bolex documentary, he had that camera that he had shot with too, that he was telling the story about. So these things, I mean, they're literally made with some of the best parts out there. And nowadays we have these digital cameras that are made out of, who knows what, that's almost meant to break. But this was a time period where they made things to last.
So had you seen Beyond the Bolex? That was, 2011 that it came out, or 2013?
I can't quite recall what year that officially came out. I know that she's still working with distributors and it's getting re-released. I don't think it came out in, I'm not sure what year, to be quite frank with you.
So you saw it afterwards. You saw Beyond the Bolex after you purchased your Bolex.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I got my Bolex 8 years ago. I watched Beyond the Bolex maybe a year and some change ago for the first time. I couldn't find it a little. I'd come across a card at Pro 8mm in Burbank. I get all my film from Spectra and do all my processing at Spectra. But I was in Pro 8 and came across their card for Beyond the Bolex. And I was like, okay, I love this camera. I want to find this movie. And then, the movie itself, I mean, it's a beautiful tale. And her great-grandfather who created the Bolex, it really talks about his whole life and tells the story of, where he came up with this, where, he ventured afterwards. And she didn't have any idea that this was in her family at the time. Yeah, she came across it when she was in film school, then slowly made the film over the course of around 10 years or so, making this movie and learning more about Jacques.
She had a good crowdfunding campaign, correct?
I think that over the course of her time making the film, there was maybe a couple moments where she was raising money. She had to travel the world to talk to so many different people about the camera and their backgrounds with it. So yeah, it was a big journey for her to build that film, and I'm so thankful that she's a producing partner on Devoted in Time. One, she's a great filmmaker, great mind to bounce stuff off of, and then two, her having that family history tied to the camera is really quite exciting, just to be making a feature with her with this picture. And then when we film in the future with the space shuttle launch, we're going to shoot it with 5 different Bolexes, and one of them is going to be Jacques from the 20s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she has 2 of his cameras, one that he shot with and one that's never been filmed with. So, and his only takes 50-foot rolls, so that's like a minute and a half of material. So you have to be really specific about who's filming when. But I'm excited at the idea of having like a line of 5 Bolexes all shooting with all different film stocks, black and white, Ektachrome, color negative. Honestly, I'm almost like a kid with this camera. When I'm like shooting Devoted in Time, like the people that I'm working with, they're like, they just see me just staring at it. But
it's beautiful.
It really is. I mean, there's
Beautiful.
really nothing like it.
Yeah.
It's heavier than what you think it is. And then these lenses, I mean, they're just so beautiful. And also, shooting on this 16mm, you think it's 4:3, but when you actually look at the gate as its entirety, it's not 4:3, this square image. It's almost 1.661, this European width of wide. So it's not super 16mm film, but it's just below it. So it's still a rectangle. And that's something I'm really, really falling in love with.
So forgive me, how does it become digitized? Because you're using actual film stock.
Yep.
How are you converting it?
So Spectra is the lab that we're working with on this picture, but most labs are equipped this way. You shoot film, you send it to them to be processed, and then they'll digitize it. So they take the negative and they put it through this machine that takes pictures of every individual frame. So we get it digitized at 4K. And then you're able to take that film stock. And some people have asked the question, well, you're still working with digital material, but the fact is that usually when you're shooting with a digital camera and you're filming, let's say, a television, there's like a flicker. Well, on this, there's not, because it's photographs. It's 24 photographs a second. So you're getting individual pictures. So there's such an element to shooting on film. Digital can be beautiful, but what you get right out of the box of filming is almost like you're almost with a finished image. You just got to tweak little bits of color. And a lot of times with digital, when you get to post, you got to do a lot more work to get there. But there's something too with the limitation, the 3 minutes a roll that end up being quite a beautiful thing to work with. And also, like, I have an idea of shooting this particular scene. I have 3 minutes of film to shoot it with. That limitation will cause you to almost take more time to compose every shot, to check your focus every single time. So an uncut roll kind of almost looks like a little experimental film on its own. Yeah.
But you also have an editing table at your home where you do splicing?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Well, when I was making films in Ohio, I always dreamed of being able to project actual celluloid. So I have a big movie theater screen in my house, and then I have a 16mm projector, and I'll explore experimental film and editing images together. For one, when I bring people to my house and I show them films and project for them, they're always like, whoa, this looks unbelievable, because you're seeing the raw film right in front of your face. And our televisions, a lot of times we're watching Netflix, let's say through an Apple TV, and your Wi-Fi might go out a little bit, so your quality of the image goes down, but you don't, general people don't notice, but we're losing a lot of quality. So when you go back to just projecting film, there's something so beautiful about it. So I like to remind myself in what we're doing, and that's such a great way to do it. And also too, there's no blue light. So how you're looking at a computer screen and it's keeping you up at night with blue light, when you're working with a light table and you're editing longhand and then you're projecting, there's no blue light that you're actually taking in. So it's become an end of the night kind of activity for me.
Okay. So you don't even need like a screen to block the blue light. You can, because there's nothing there.
No, it's just a light bulb.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's not really, I mean, there might be some kind of blue light there, but it's not anything like a television or a computer or, something of that sort.